Toby Cook. It's a pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. And Toby, 11th year for, I still call him the world champion Kansas City Royals. I've known Toby for a while. He serves as the team's vice president of publicity, promoting all aspects of the club's business efforts. And prior to joining the Royals, Toby spent 15 years as a news anchor and reporter at 4 television stations and made it all the way through. I can't believe it, Toby. Including WDAF here in Kansas City. Toby grew up Lutheran, but converted to Catholicism in 2008. He believes in being part of the Royals was what brought him into the Catholic Church, in fact. At Easter Vigil Mass in 2008, Cook and his wife became Catholic, and all 5 of his children have since been baptized. That's awesome. So without further ado, Toby Cook.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you all for having me today. It just has been a delight. I've had an opportunity over the years, including my time at Fox 4, to do stories here at the high school and at Donnelly College next door. And I've had an opportunity to come here about a week and a half ago where I was able to kind of get a lay of the land before I came to speak to you. And this is every bit as good as I thought it was going to be. You can feel a real sense of community here. And see if this seems familiar. A sense of identity here, a spirit in this place that you can't quite describe, but it's there. Although I have to say that I saw Dr. McKiernan's sideburns from when he was in high school. I've been around TV for a long time, and I can never unsee that. So, you have a beautiful voice, by the way. Did you hear him narrate during the video? And it's like one of those guys where he could read the phone book to you, and you're relaxed and happy. And this has been a very Catholic weekend for me. I had an opportunity to speak yesterday at Men Under Construction, which was at Ascension Parish in Overland Park, and I've had 3 men come up to me tonight and say, "You did a great job yesterday." And I was hoping to God that there wouldn't be anybody here from Men Under Construction, because I'm basically just recycling the same talk tonight. So this will be the 1/3 version of it, because I spoke for quite a long time yesterday. And then I actually lectured this morning at Ascension, and then I am here tonight. So I'm grateful to be here. It's a great way to start off Lent. When I was asked initially to come and speak, I again heard about Bishop Ward and really what I consider the ministry here in Kansas City, Kansas, as much as anything. But my wife Barbara is here tonight, and my wife and I are very big into making it possible for kiddos, and I say kiddos because we still have a stretch of kiddos in our household, but young people to have an opportunity to do something that they wouldn't ordinarily be able to do. And I just feel like that fits right into the purpose of tonight, right? I started with the Royals in 2006, and I've had a blast right up until a couple of days ago when I was in Arizona. Yeah, and don't feel jealous because it is exactly the same weather as we've had here for the past month. It's nothing. But it was a beautiful day in Arizona, and we were able to host a thing called Baseball Fantasy Camp for Kids, which is a baseball clinic that we put on for kids with physical and mental disabilities. And we do things like that at the stadium all the time out at the Little K with Special Olympics and a group called Variety, the children's charity, and there's just nothing like it. I've had people ask me, what's the best part of your job? Well, you know what? Winning the World Series was a really, really good part of my job. Getting this gargantuan ring was a really, really fun part of my job. I wasn't going to wear it tonight, but my wife always says, when you dress up pretty, put the ring on, right? Thank you. And we had an opportunity with 4 of our current players to make the day, week, month, and year for kiddos with physical and mental disabilities at this clinic. Right after the game on Thursday, played the Colorado Rockies, Eric Hosmer, my 4th man crush with the Royals. Mike Sweeney was the first. That was a little bit more platonic. And then Alex Gordon and Eric Hosmer. And We had Terrence Gore, who was with us, and who else was there? Drew Buterre, who caught the last out of the World Series, and my latest, Peter O'Brien, whom we got from the Arizona Diamondbacks, who can absolutely mash the ball. And ladies, his smile is dreamy. And at this point, Maggie over here is like, where's he going with this? God, we wanted you to talk about your faith and the high school and all of that. We just have a good time in baseball. And we're here to have a great time tonight to remember what you all are doing to raise money so that these young people in Kansas City, Kansas, and the surrounding area who might not otherwise have an opportunity to succeed in a very special way can succeed. And that's right in our wheelhouse, in our catcher's mitt, so to speak, of what we do at Royals and Royals Charities. I started with the team in 2006. I got a call out of the blue one day from a woman named Ginger Salem, who was the executive assistant to the president of the Royals, Dan Glass. And she asked me if I would come and MC a Royals Charities event. And she said this because I was on Fox 4 at the time, and she said, "You always say nice things about the team on the air." Now, this was 2005. You remember how good the Royals were in 2005. At a great time, they asked me about the next year, and one thing led to another, and Dan and I started talking, and I ended up going to work for the Royals. And it's been a wonderful journey since. I was hired 5 weeks after Dayton Moore was hired, so I got to see it all from the very beginning right up until the World Series championship, and then that somewhat strange year in 2016. You know, we had Alex Gordon stranded at third base in Game 7 of the World Series in 2014, and from that point on, it was like, well, we got to go back. I mean, it was like this thing in my head. It was like ticking. It's like, I can't relax until we go back. But teams don't go back to the World Series back-to-back. And yet we did, and we won it. And then in 2016, it was like, well, what do we do now? It's like, well, I guess we go win another one. And had a few injuries and got a little gassed at the end of the year. And after a nice, long off season of rest, the team is ready to go. It's been very, very exciting. But the absolute best part of my job is being able to take the generosity of the Glass family and the resources of a Major League Baseball team and to do good things for people, specifically to make something possible for a young person that they never could have dreamed would have happened. And so I'm going to share with you a couple of stories that I shared with my friends at Men Under Construction. Two of my favorite baseball stories as I try to transition a little bit into why I'm absolutely convinced. I'm going to forget his name right now. Tim, the evangelist, Catholic evangelist. He was a Pentecostal minister who became Catholic. He's on Catholic radio. Tim Staples? Staples. Tim Staples wrote a book called Jimmy Swaggart Made Me Catholic. I don't know if you are familiar with that book. But in some ways, George Brett made me Catholic. And if you've ever met George Brett, you're like, what? He's a good man. He's a good man. It was 1976 when my dad took me to my first Royals game, and it was 1979 when this particular game happened, which is one of my favorite memories growing up a Royals fan. At that point, we went to about 2 Royals games a year. We lived in southeast Kansas, in Independence, Kansas, about 2.5 hours south of Overland Park. And we would go to a couple of games a year, and we went to a night game, and we were playing the Boston Red Sox. And at that point, after watching the Royals for 3 or 4 years in person twice a year, we went to this game, and at that point, I had never seen them lose. Now, think back of 2005, when I came on board with the Royals. Can you imagine a kid at my age having never seen the Royals lose over a stretch of 2 or 3 years? But they were a very good baseball team, and it was possible to go up twice a year and not see a loss. Well, we were tied 4-4 going into the top of the 9th inning, and a Carl Yastrzemski came up and hit the ball about halfway through the Royals' bullpen, which at that time was in right field, and they took a 6-4 lead. And I thought, this may be it. Bottom of the 9th, 1 out. I'm 2 outs to go, and I'm going to see my first loss. 2 outs. I'm one out to go, and I'm going to see my first loss. And this kid that they had brought up not too long ago from the minors named Willie Wilson is batting like ninth or something, and he hits this pop fly into left field. And this is as annoying as can be for the people at Men Under Construction yesterday, and I'm going to do it again today. I'm going to pause the story right there and pick it back up. You see, I grew up in a wonderful home in southeast Kansas, and I had the opportunity to do all the really cool things. I was born and baptized into the Lutheran Church, as it says in the program, and I had no designs, just like I had no designs on working for the Royals one day, I had no designs on becoming Catholic. And if you know any Lutherans, you know that they're wonderful, wonderful people, salt of the earth, great people. And from 10,000 feet, or if you're not familiar with the different Christian traditions, Catholicism and Lutheranism can look very similar. You know, our clergy dress alike and our churches look similar, and we have kind of the spine of the Mass, the liturgy and all of that. But if you get down on the ground level, you'll see some fairly big differences, and one of them was the theology of the Bible, and one of them was the theology of our authority of Scripture and who's in charge of determining what, and the Eucharist. And as Lutherans, we kind of have it where we talk about the fact that Jesus is present in, with, and under the elements of the bread and the wine, that it doesn't transform into the body and blood of Jesus, but it is truly present. So I would hear all the phrases in the world about being Catholic light, and you're on the other side of the Tiber River and all of that, and I never had any designs on it. And I spent the majority of my life as a Lutheran, 40 years in fact, or as you might say biblically, 40 years in the wilderness. Because as Moses and others, I crossed over a river back in 2008. Now, the long story short on that is that in 2007, Mike Sweeney, who many of you are familiar with, the modern-day saint of the Kansas City Royals Alumni Association, hosted a Mass at the stadium where he had then Bishop Finn from the Kansas City St. Joe Diocese come and celebrate Mass. And he invited everybody. And I was intrigued because I had spent most of my life feeling like I was getting pulled closer and closer to Holy Mother Church, but I didn't really think it was going to happen. And then at one point, I kind of felt like maybe I was as Catholic as I could possibly be, with God forbid ever becoming Catholic, right? I wasn't going to step that far. And then I was sitting in my office one day at Kauffman Stadium after a 15-year television career and thinking that I had seen my life come full circle, because at 8 years old, I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, and at 9 years old, I decided I wanted to be a play-by-play announcer for the Royals because I was a lousy baseball player at age 8, and maybe I could go into the broadcasting realm. And I got to see Denny Matthews and Fred White in person, and it was all very exciting. And then I discovered something on a website about the Coming Home Network, which is a program on EWTN for people who have converted to the Catholic Church or reverted to the Catholic Church. They were Catholic and they've come home. And I spent the next 2 days after reading a story about a fellow Lutheran who had converted, and I was numb. Because I was like, I had been searching for quite some time. Is this really going to happen? Is there a chance that I actually could take the plunge and become Catholic? And during the next several months, while we put on these masses at the stadium, and Mike Sweeney was there, and Father Richard Rocha on the Kansas City Diocese, that name rings a bell to some of you in here. As we put on these Saturday masses, I read lots of conversion stories and listened to Catholic Family Radio. And then at one point I said to Barbara, I got to go to Mass. And she said, go. 2 weeks later, I was in RCIA class. I'm skipping through a lot of stuff now, right? This is the 15-minute version of it, not the 45-minute version. RCIA class in the Easter Vigil 2008, the greatest thing that ever happened to us, we came into the church. We had 3 children as Lutherans. We had 2 children as Catholics. See, we were all Catholic all along. We just didn't know it, right? And our 4th child, Andrew, was baptized the night of Easter Vigil. And then we were confirmed. He came into the church 25 minutes before we did. He's been a Catholic 25 minutes longer than we have. And then we finally had number 5, Caroline, who has a blessed extra chromosome. We have a bumper sticker that says, "I love someone with Down syndrome." Now, the lessons that I learned through all of that were, I absolutely believe that there is a bigger and greater purpose to the physical things that we see in our lives, even careers. A 40-year seemingly life comes full circle, and I get to go to work for the Royals after I had fallen in love with the Royals those many years ago. That seems like a kind of a big deal. But when I came to the realization that all of that was preparation, my following George Brett back in 1976 when he won his first batting title, and in 1980 when he was running away with the American League batting title. And boy, what a great year that he ended, right? He was batting .400 for the majority of the year, and he ended that year with hemorrhoids. That has nothing to do with what point I'm trying to make right now, but it just popped into my head. Anyway, and all of that leading up to, and then I come to the realization that I got to work for the Major League Baseball team that eventually won the World Series because God was calling me home to the Catholic Church. One other baseball story. It was top of the 9th inning, Game 4, American League Championship Series against the Baltimore Orioles in 2014. And we were 3 outs away from going to the World Series. And I went down and stood with Barbara and another couple of friends, and we were 2 outs away from going to the World Series. And we were 1 out away from going to the World Series, and I was feeling the kind of joy I felt for the first time since I was a little kid as a Royals fan. Now, you have to remind me, did I finish that story from back in 1979? Oh, yeah, Willie Wilson at the plate, and he pops out to left field, and it's over, and Fred Lynn, the center fielder, comes over, and Jim Rice, the left fielder, and just as the game is about ready to end, they collide, and the ball drops. And a guy named Steve Braun came up and hit it further into the Royals bullpen than Carl Yastrzemski did and tied it 6-6. And then they won it in the bottom of the 10th. And I still hadn't seen the Royals loss, and I was skipping out of that stadium with just the kind of joy that I felt when we were 2 outs to go, 1 out to go. We're going to the World Series. Jay Leno was joking about us 4 years ago, and we're going to the World Series. And a really neat thing happened, by the way. The guy that was standing next to me was blind. And he had been standing there kind of taking in the whole game, but he really didn't know exactly what was going on. He was figuring it out by the sounds, and our great PA announcer, I mean, he's nothing like you, Dr. McKiernan, but our great PA announcer, Mike McCartney, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and he was listening to what was going on during the game. Do you know, I've never cried when I've told this story, but I almost feel like it. Do you know that I got to do play-by-play for him? And I'm not telling you that because I'm patting myself on the back. I'm saying that these are the kind of moments that happen when we just avail ourselves to the next thing. And I got to say, all right, here's what's happening. You know, a kid that wanted to be a play-by-play announcer, and I'm telling this guy what's happening next. I didn't have to tell him when we won it all because the place went nuts. And that was really, really very exciting. Friends, when I converted to the Catholic Church, again, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. But I will share with you, and I'm going to make a little bit of a lesson here for our students who are here today, including Ricardo, whom you're going to hear from in just a few minutes, and those of you who are here to support them. After my conversion, and I am absolutely convinced of this, that I went into a deal with God. When I had come to realize that I was going to become Catholic, I said, God, I think I want to become Catholic. And he said, okay, but here's your part of it. I'm going to break you down, and I'm going to build you back up. And I went through some of the most difficult times in my personal life, not my public life, not what I put on Facebook, right, or any of us, but I went through a purgatorial experience. And somewhere between that hopeless feeling of that ball in left field when there's 2 outs in the 9th inning and that elation of going to the World Series is where these young folks in the next couple of years are going to find themselves, maybe even repeatedly. But we had a great Catholic evangelist yesterday at Men Under Construction that talked about us being set up. He talked about Lazarus and being raised from the dead by Jesus 4 days later, and how in Jewish times, once you got past about 3 days, there was no use in hoping that maybe there would be a miracle. And they were all being set up because Jesus was able to walk in and effect this miracle for their faith. I am the resurrection and the life. Sometimes we have to go through that near-death experience, whatever it is in our lives, and that elation and everything in between, in order to feel alive. And man, I feel alive today. There are a lot of kids who have grown up in this environment around here of the high school that have gone through here that are so much more feeling alive today than they ever would have because of what you're doing tonight. It's a really, really good thing. Now, Men Under Construction yesterday, somehow I nailed something. I didn't even mean for it to be. It was an applause line at the end. Somebody just started clapping, and I was so grateful because I said, I don't have a way to wrap this up, so I'm just going to say, well, I can't finish any better than that. The guy started applauding. So I can't finish any better than just stopping now, other than to say that your generosity will pay dividends in ways that you cannot imagine. And that the example that these three people have given who have been inducted tonight will live on. But even the people that have just started to be involved in this organization and fundraising for the high school, it will turn into blessings like you can't imagine. Thank you for having me. Congratulations again to our inductees. And you know what? That 2015 World Championship was so fun. We may just do it again in 2017. God love you all. Thank you.